Casser-Jayne, and welcome to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, a podcast akin to the great salons of times past. Pour yourself a martini, grab a spot on your favorite sofa, and listen to the great artists, writers, politicians, and celebrities of our day discuss and debate the current political and economic scene. Art and music, film, literature, or maybe talk about the newest trends in fashion, design, and haute cuisine. Whether it's the current political cocktail or the latest must-read award-winning book, we tackle all topics and like to stir and sometimes shake things up. On this episode of the Halli Casser-Jayne Show, we begin with Podcast America, our weekly politics segment in which veteran White House correspondent Matthew Cooper and I slice and dice the current political landscape as we near November 6th and the midterm elections. And joining me in the second half hour, I have the pleasure of bringing you my conversation with author and feminist Hallie Iglehart Austen. Stay tuned and enjoy the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. Let's get to it. Journalist and veteran White House correspondent Matthew Cooper is known for his in-depth reporting and analysis from Washington, D.C. Mr. Cooper has worked for some of America's most prestigious magazines, including Time, Newsweek, The New Republic, National Journal, and U.S. News and World Report. He now serves as a contributing editor to Washingtonian magazine. For the record, Cooper also earned national attention during the CIA leak case when he was held in contempt of court and threatened with imprisonment for his refusal to name his sources and to testify before the grand jury regarding the Valerie Plame CIA leak investigation, a case that went all the way to the Supreme Court. He's appeared on 60 Minutes, Meet the Press, Hardball, and This Week with George Stephanopoulos. He has covered Donald Trump extensively. His hard-hitting and insightful profiles of the Donald, always well worth the read. And now from here until Election Day, Matt will be my co-host on our new segment, Podcast America. I hope you enjoy. Let's talk. Matt, you and I are talking off air, and this is all becoming one big blur at this point. So much is going on. You can't keep track of it. But I have this feeling, as we start to talk, that things are kind of calming down just a little bit, sort of the calm before the storm, I think. But forget the election. Right now we have something much more important to talk about, and that's this just horrible story about the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Give the audience a little background on this because I think it is important to the story, and the ramifications of this, I think, are huge. Talk to me.
Yeah, well, he's a Saudi national, and he's had worked for the government at one time, and he's not he's not an outsider to the palace intrigue in Riyadh and the world of Saudi Arabia, but he's been something of a critic, and it appears that he was lured to the Saudi embassy in Turkey, and it seems to have disappeared and probably been murdered, and it's not at all clear if the Saudis will cop to that or not, what exactly happened, and what the U.S. response will be, which has been fairly muted so far. So that's where we're at.
I find this story to be, maybe to me, one of, I think, the most illustrative. Is that the word? I can't get the word out. I'm so exhausted.
I think you got it.
I got it right. Did I get it right?
You always do.
Thank you. Of who Trump is and what he's really all about. And that's why this story interests me. My heart goes out to his family, to the Washington Post, to all, his coworkers, to anybody new. He sounds like he was quite the remarkable man. But to me, this says something more about Trump than anything we've seen before. He's played this. There's money, obviously, behind Saudi money behind Trump, although he tried to deny that today. We all know that that's not true. There's certainly tape of him even saying so. Millions and gazillions of dollars. And then there's this whole thing that of America and our long-term, crazy relationship with the Saudis. and King Salman, and now this Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who is supposedly the person behind it, the de facto ruler. They call him MBS, as we... Who's the worst thug here? Is it MBS or is it DJT?
Yeah, that's where we're at the moment. The context for all this is that MBS has sort of taken power in Saudi Arabia, and some people were encouraged by signs that he might be a reformer, sort of pull the country into the 18th century. He might be in favor of women driving. They seemed to be an opening to Israel. There were signs that the U.S. found encouraging. At the same time, there were also clear signs that he was an authoritarian. He basically, had members of the royal family out at, I guess it was the Ritz-Carlton in Riyadh, and basically shook them down for money. And, this was a year or two back.
Right. And Trump and Trump team, and certainly the son-in-law, Jared, who had a lot invested here. Obviously, He has a great, wants to get an Israel-Palestinian deal, yada, yada, yada. And also, I think his family is into the Saudis for money, like must be up the yin-yang. Kind of thing.
That's the other background, is that there's still, despite, an economy built on, dinosaur fossils, they still have a lot of oil money to throw around, and they're very influential. And, of course, vis-a-vis, the Gulf State Saudi rivalry with Iran is the other context here.
Right.
I mean,
that's important.
It's pushed Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states closer to Israel. It's made them tougher on Iran. It's made them warmer to the Trump administration. So there's a lot of kind of three-dimensional chess stuff going on here. But the crime they're accused of actually, luring the guy to the embassy, killing him there, and allegedly dismembering him. Is just, it's so awful. It's so, medieval.
And so what is awful above and beyond that? And by the way, I just read that they dismembered him while he was alive. Unbelievable.
I mean, it's unbelievable.
Right. But what's so awful is the President of the United States did not affirmatively, without even so much as a waiver, say, stop, oh my gosh, we are taking action.
Well,
and
that's
has
right.
Protected these people. That's the part of the story that I find atrocious.
Absolutely. I mean, the Saudis are putting on a big financial conference this week or next week, I think. And, a number of U.S. companies are not going now. Jamie Dimon at Chase is not going, and others. But Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, is still going. And Trump has made it clear he doesn't want to see any, economic sanctions like forgoing some arms sales to the Saudis. So it's
ugly.
It's a very ugly place. I think the realpolitik of it, like after Tiananmen Square, and the Chinese murdered hundreds or maybe even thousands, eventually U.S.-Chinese relations got back on track, but there was at least a pause. We're not even, we're not even seeing a pause.
No, what we're getting now, the most that we can get now is Rubio, wimp that he has finally stood his ground on the moral issue, and Trump, I call him Tushy Kisser, you'll forgive me, Lindsey Graham, who had an interesting week himself this week. He did another off-the-chart, oh my God, I stood up for them in Congress. I was the number one. I'm done. This guy goes, meaning, the MBS, or else grandstanding. In the meantime, Congress is home, and raising money and campaigning for their folks. So, like I said, if anybody wondered how, and I don't think the word is ruthless, help me out here, because it's beyond ruthless, who Trump is and what he's willing to do to protect himself and his own family and his own interests. I think this is the perfect picture of who the hell he is. It makes me sick. Anything else we can do on that one? You know me, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it's, the question is, did his coziness with dictators, not only has he failed to condemn it, but did his coziness with dictators generally let the Saudis feel like they had a green light or maybe a yellow light to go do this, to feel like, hey, there's not going to be consequences.
I think that's a really great point. And here's another one. Does not Trump really understand who he's dealing with MBS, with Kim Jong-un, with Putin? Does he really understand? And is this a huge, again, window into, his own political ineptitude when it comes to foreign policy and the players on the stage? I think that's another avenue, that one could go down here.
I mean, I think most presidents are aware that there's their personal relationships with other world leaders, and then there's the relationship between the countries, and the two can be different. And, we saw with George W. Bush, I think he let his fondness for Putin get out ahead of him, and it's something he and the people in his administration regretted. But Trump, it's all dictated by the personal and whether they were nice to him.
Right.
And so I think he's just,
somebody's going to bump. You're going to kill me for saying this, but I'm going to say it. You could see Trump being bumped off out of his own sheer idiocy.
I'm not sure I agree with that.
Here's what I'm saying to you, and maybe, this is me being me again, because, I can get very dramatic. I just think he has laid himself bare because people can walk all over him. And if they ever saw an avenue to take down the mighty United States because there's an idiot at the helm, this is.
I don't think that's the case.
You're so good. Sending Pompeo, you're.
I'm not good. I just don't think that's for a lot of reasons. But let's go on to Pompeo.
But let's go on to Pompeo, because that was the other thing that I found. Oh my gosh! And that was him sending Pompeo over there to have to smile. Oh my God! That moment, watching that this morning, that truly made my stomach churn in ways I haven't had it happen in a long time. What was Pompeo thinking? And he flew for hours for 15 lousy minutes. I mean, bad moment.
Yeah, you cannot let them seem to take advantage of you. I went to Syria with Bill Clinton in the 90s when he made a mission up there, and Assad kept him waiting, which is, bad for everybody. No, I think, if the Saudis, I don't even think this was good for the Saudis. I mean, you want to seem like you're taking it seriously rather than just, blowing off the U.S. Secretary of State. But the Saudis must feel like, they're in the driver's seat, that the U.S.'s antipathy towards Iran is such, and interest in an Israeli favored settlement as such, and the oil is such, that they don't have to worry about the U.S., and that's not where you want to be. Ramifications
of this enormous, and I'm not even going to do what I normally do in saying, how does this end? Because I don't think we know how it ends, and I think we have to wait to see what happens. So come back next week, folks.
Yeah, and also what did happen.
And what did happen, right, we don't know for sure. And we'll do that. Let's do 180 degrees.
Totally.
I want to do a send-up to the grand dame of interview, Miss Leslie Stahl. Because I think she did one of the most unbelievable interviews of Donald Trump that's been done. She cornered him. She nailed him. She let him build his own, bury him himself. It was sad because great interview, and I implore everybody, don't watch it once, watch it twice, watch it 3 times, because it is filled with information. It's unbelievable. But the ratings on the show tanked, as have Mr. Trump's ratings been tanking. Even on Fox News, He's no longer carrying all of his craziness in these great rallies that he's having. Talk to me about that. What do you think about that? Fatigue?
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting. I don't know if it is general fatigue or if it's fatigue among supporters, because, you have to assume that people who were watching the Fox rallies live were generally supportive and were not, hate watching it. Yeah, no, something may be happening to his ratings. And, he's been doing kind of a media blitz. He's doing a lot of talking to the cameras during the day. He's doing a lot of rallies. He may be a little
overexposed.
A little overexposed. Yeah. It's hard to put your finger on it.
The other thing I was going to say is, I wonder, this is just palace intrigue. Something's going on at Fox. New management, new people.
Oh, no question. The Disney sale.
Yeah. And I'm wondering whether they are, and by the way, Laura Ingram's, they can't sell an ad on her show. And she's got this lowbrow ad people behind, companies.
Right. But that's been a staple of a lot of talk radio and
well, I'm talking about on
TV,
Fox, on
right?
the TV show. She
on the TV, yeah.
On the TV. She's in trouble. They can't get
it's all stair climbers and potency supplements and You know.
You got it. So I wonder whether or not that's not a choice by Fox for different reasons than that, and I wonder how chummy he is all the time. All right, here comes another big switch. You ready?
I'm ready.
Unless you had something else to say on the
No. I think you're asking all the right questions.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. I love when you tell me I'm good. But it's okay. Women in the news. I want to talk about this.
Yeah.
Second half of the show, by the way, folks, stick around. I have a remarkable woman whose name, by the way, is Hallie on the show, who she and I do a great conversation about women and women on the East Coast and the West Coast, Republican women, Democrat women. It's phenomenal. So I thought we'd kind of lead up with it, and I'd like to discuss women a little bit because a lot of women making a lot of news this week, okay? So let's start with Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to do it briefly. We're going to go through them all.
Yes,
but
right.
I think this is important that we get there. She opens up her mouth when she probably shouldn't because this is not a good time for her to be showing her face and making noise. But she does, and she was asked about her husband and whether or not, what happened between he and Monica, whether it was an abuse of power. And she said no. I'm going to throw this out at you. This is what I think. I disagree with people who say it was an abuse of power, and I want to say that with the caveat we're going back, 30 years? Oh, yeah. Well, things were different in the old days. He was not an old man then. He was a young guy, handsome as the day is long.
Right.
Okay. She was not a young girl. She was 20-something years old herself, whether she was an intern or not. On the record, she set her sights. She was going after him. I don't think Monica was the victim of Bill. I don't think Bill, in a way, was. He might even be. When a woman sets her store on a guy, watch out. So she's got the goods. But Monica was the victim of the press, of Linda Tripp, of Ken Starr, of the Republicans, even, by the way, Kavanaugh.
Oh, very much, Kevin.
Okay, and we can go down the whole little thing. And I was interacting with Katie Couric, as a matter of fact, about this on Twitter today. And I just said to her, I said, look, we need to be careful about what we call abuse and who we make the victims. But the other victim in this is Hillary Clinton, who has gotten beaten up because she stood by her man. I want to bring that up because that was another moment. And I wondered, as a man, what you think of that.
Well, I have complicated feelings. I mean, I think, first of all, nobody understands anybody else's marriage. Right. So, whether it's the Clintons or your neighbors, you don't really know what's going on and why they stay together, why they don't, and what's going on. All these people who are opining, she should have left him, and why did she stay, and it was for the power, and I think all that's kind of crap because,
Right.
I think it's a complicated relationship. They love each other. They fight. They each thinks the other is the smartest person in the world. I think it's a particularly nettlesome relationship. So I never understood why so many women were down on her for staying.
Right.
In the marriage. Lots of people stay through affairs. And I think he had sort of slowed his appetites in the years preceding. But whether Monica's, I think the definition of what's an abuse of power has changed, right? I mean, a consensual affair between an older man and a younger woman in the workplace was, let's leave the presidency out of it. I think it would have been seen years ago as, maybe untoward, but not an abuse of power. I think today it is seen more as that. But I think you're right. The larger context here is that they were late, that the Republicans had their sights set on him, and Monica was collateral damage. And, of all the desk mates in all the world, she had Linda Tripp as her.
Can you imagine? Oh, my God.
I mean, just, speak into my lapel,
It's true. But I wanted to bring that up, and I think it's important because in this age of the Me Too movement, and you and I have touched on over the weeks some of this stuff, what happened with Kavanaugh and Dr. Ford, yada, yada, yada. I think we really do have to be careful and about how we play this, and how we rewrite history is another
And I
thing.
don't think he should have resigned.
No, oh, God,
And, there's still, I don't share the Kirsten Gillibrand take, but that's what he should have done.
No, that makes me crazy as well. Okay, let's move to the next woman who came up, and that's Melania Trump. Did a rare interview on 2020.
Yeah, she did. And, I think she was attracting attention for her dramatic, safari outfit. that she wore in Egypt with the pith helmet and the full blue steel, and she, I thought it was interesting. I mean, it's again, who understands anyone else's marriage? I mean,
I don't think it's about their marriage, by the way. Here's my take. Right?
You think it's okay?
Well, first of all, forgive me, but I hope you can get what I'm saying with this. I think she's Trump in drag.
In the sense that she's like narcissistic,
narcissistic. She's self-absorbed. She's everything that he is, and she has the same sense of the world's beaten down on her, and she might do it differently, but she strikes out as she finally admitted the truth with the "I don't care" code. She's small-minded. She's got a small sense of self, obviously, and she's got herself a rich husband. And she plays the trophy wife. And guess what? Everybody thought that she was together. I think she's as nutty as he is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think it's one assumes that if he was just Don Trump, car insurance salesman who made $70,000, she would not have married him. But the heart wants what the heart wants. I don't
think it had a damn thing to do with the heart.
I
honey.
doubt it. I don't understand the
all
marriage.
All that glitters is gold.
But she's I think it's a very very strange relationship.
They're holding hands.
Right, they're holding hands. But it's like he's so out there in his extramarital affairs in a way that, everyone knows he was with this, porn star, while his wife had recently given birth, and it's sort of like that's just baked in the cake now. People don't even care. Even his most adamant supporters don't care, and so it's interesting because, will she stand? The whole "will she stand by him" question matters so much less now than it did during the Clinton years.
I don't think anybody cares whether she would or she wouldn't. I think that the issue there with her and his affairs, if you'll, he goes out, she doesn't have to worry about him. That's number one. So maybe that's an issue for her. And number two, maybe he's kinky, and that's why he goes to porn stars. Which, by the way, the latest reporting is that she's one of many, according to Mr. Avenatti. Okay, and speaking of porn stars, another woman in the news, Stormy Daniels, and Avenatti. He loses this case, which the press goes and makes a whole big to-do about it, but the fact of the matter is it's like about it was like 1 gazillionth of a piece of what they've got going there. They lost it on the defamation character. But then Trump does it again today. Now, he may have wanted to get the press off of the Khashoggi story, but he goes and he calls Miss Daniels horseface. I called him... Okay, I'm going to say it.
Yeah.
He's a horse's ass, calling her horse face. But, which is that? Talk to me.
The sort of insults to women's appearances is so unbelievable. And, it's not unbelievable. It's just standard fare. But it's, to someone you slept with especially, it just seems like particularly incredible. Look, as long as Avenatti's in court, this thing is going to be a burr under the president. And, of course, it's the first week in a long time we're not talking about Mueller.
Well, right. Well, actually, we haven't been talking about him a whole lot. We remember he was an addendum to the show last week. I said, remember him?
Yeah.
Right. Next woman, Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, I'm very curious your take on this.
Oh, my gosh. Well, I'll tell you what. I think the timing of it was just stupid. She was thinking about Elizabeth Warren first before she was thinking about the Democratic Party and what the Democrats need to put their focus to. I think there's that. However, I will take issue with the fact that everybody's saying, well, it's a lot of hooey. She's 1 gazillionth of Native American ancestry. But I was reading about this. And it turns out if you were an Oklahoma family, that this is very typical. That most of the Oklahoman families, they went out to the territory. Right. It was before it was OKLAHOMA and, and Hammerstein and
right. It was not Shirley Jones.
It was not Shirley. So what I'm saying is, okay, fine. But I think she didn't need to go there quite now. And I think, he goes low and I don't, we get into that. Why answer him, at this point anyway? That's where I am. But what I did not like was the Democrats and the news media jumping on her, and they kept saying, "Why did she do this? Why did she do this?" And then the left-wing news media was drumming it into a story. And I don't mean to be metaphorical drums.
No, I agree.
It was
no,
like,
the pundit class hated it.
Right.
And look, she's running for re-election in Massachusetts. It seemed to me if she was going to do it, she should do it before she faced her own voters. And maybe 3 months ago would have been better than this late in the cycle. But I think it would have been worse for her if she did it a month from now. I mean, that would be a weird thing to do right after an election. So, look, I think she doesn't seem to have used her native ancestry to try to game the system, right? She wasn't taking out, SBA loans as an American Indian. She wasn't like seeking Native American, I don't know. She wasn't trying to open a casino. I mean, she wasn't milking it.
No, but like I said, they're beating up on her. And this is...
Yeah, they're beating up on her.
But I don't get why. Except that, there's one thing that the pundocracy can do. It's kill Democrats. They're doing to women, and I guess this is something we can talk about in all these women.
I totally agree.
You know where I'm going, because they're doing to her what they did to Hillary.
Oh, I totally agree. And, maybe Obama should have done the birth certificate thing a year out instead of waiting till he's in the presidency to do the birth certificate. I mean, maybe there's something to be said for doing this as a prophylactic now.
I don't know.
I'm not as down on her as my fellow Washington press corps types.
Yeah. It seemed very weird to me. I'm going to throw out a story. I'm not sure we need to comment on it, but I want to say that the FBI today raided the San Juan city offices weeks after Trump alleged corruption by his most unfavorite mayor, which is the San Juan mayor, Carmen Yulín Cruz.
Right.
Who he has been going to bat. And it just struck me as incredibly odd that this occurred all the way in Puerto Rico. The FBI went in there. If there's anything you want, I just needed to throw that out. Any thoughts you might want to say before we move on to the next thing, or just let it go?
Yeah, no, one would like to think that Christopher Wray, the FBI director, and others would not countenance that, but
jeez.
It's pretty awful. So I mean, it's awful if it was used politically, and I don't know that it was, but
it sure that
is worth asking about.
Right. Okay. The next one is Heidi Heitkamp, who, Jesus, major boo-boo. She's already in trouble, but then she goes and she runs an ad with abused women who aren't really abused and names people who didn't give her permission. And I must say she gave a very heartfelt and very sincere, because she does sincerity quite well, by the way.
Yeah.
Apology, but this may have been the nail in the coffin.
Well, you really can't screw that kind of thing up. Yeah.
That was bad. That was woo.
That is one of those things. It's like, advertising 101. You just can't.
It's not what people are going to do, though, right?
I mean, it's not that Republican ads don't have outlandish charges. I mean, this season's been incredible for that. But that
was a sad moment. That was a sad moment. But I wanted to talk about her because of that, and we're talking women. But I also wanted to mention voter suppression. And we could have done this at the top of the show, but we're doing it now. My God, she won with the Native American vote. And now they're suppressing that, and they're saying, sorry, if you don't have a street address, even if you live on a reservation where there are no streets, you can't vote. And then what's happening in Indiana, and then the Georgia thing. Oh, my God. I mean, really and truly, Matt, this is as bad as I can remember it. And they seem to be getting away with it. Yeah,
well, I think a lot of these things are real. Yeah, no, I think there's a lot of stuff that's suspect. I mean, look, I've thought some of the charges of voter suppression, intimidation have been misstated or even exaggerated. I mean, there have been occasions of using gerrymandering that is, more typical of what parties do than not. But the Supreme Court has upheld voter ID laws, and But, what's going on in Georgia where you've got a very, discrete number of voters that are like having trouble, having their registry hold in time for the election. And the guy who's running for governor is also the Secretary of State. I mean, that's ugly.
Yeah, and that's something we'll have to explore because the voting has already started in a lot of these states. Indiana's another one where they're playing the games. And so I want to see what happens. I mean, why are the judges taking so long, by the way, in the Georgia case to respond? They've had
Yeah, that seems like one where you'd want to,
Yeah, you want to move on it real quick.
You want to really expedite it.
So that one upsets me. I want to go to Beto O'Rourke. $35 million haul in 3 months.
Yeah, well, I've got a theory on Beto.
I want to hear it because I don't get it. He's 8 points down as we go to press, if you will. Talk to me.
Well, I think he's gonna run for president whether he wins or loses.
Agree.
And I think when you had I think you have to think back to like a Lincoln who lost his Senate race in 1858, but was so celebrated in the course of losing after the Lincoln-Douglas debates that he was elected president. 2 years later, he was just an ex-congressman after all. He hadn't been in the House for 10 years. And, I think Beto's going to just have the sort of ability to run for president if he loses, and I think he likely will lose to Cruz. That'll be very interesting to see. So I think whatever happens, in November, he's going to be with us.
Yeah, I think he's going to be with us. But here's my point that I wanted to make at it. And the Hispanic voters aren't performing supposedly according to what people are. The people who know these things and look at numbers and what have you, whatever. I think one of his problems is that what happened is I think a lot of Hispanics may be legal in Texas on the borders and some of those big cities, areas outside the cities that he needs them. But their families aren't legal.
Right. And so why go vote?
They're not going to vote because they don't want any attention on themselves. They are what Trump has effectively done with this ICE thing is say, you dare to walk out of your little world, and we'll finish you guys off. And I think that is suppressing some of it. Maybe it'll surprise everybody at the end. And it's not just there; it's happening in Florida too, by the way.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. I mean, I think that could well be what's happening. If your uncle is living in the house and he's here illegally,
right?
He overstayed his visa or whatever.
You're gonna keep a real low
why
profile.
just you just may not want to have any attention on you.
Right.
I mean,
right.
And also, is Trump's Hispanic popularity as low as it needs to be for Democrats? I'm not sure.
Say that again. I'm not sure I understand.
I'm not sure Trump is as unpopular with Hispanics as Democrats would hope. In other words, I think he did better. He did better in 2016 with Hispanics than people thought he would.
That's true, and you have
and I think in a race against Cruz is Hispanic. Now that counts for a little bit.
Well, it counts for a lot. He is, and Cuban Hispanics are very different than Hispanics from other parts of Latin America. So I think there's that too. Can I just a little factoid on Ted Cruz I learned today?
Yeah.
Did you know that he had a net worth of $500,000 when he entered the Senate in 2012? And he's now worth $4.6 million, and he somehow managed to do that on a $174K salary.
Yeah, that's only 6 years. Yeah, the market went up, but it didn't go up that much.
Boy, right?
Yeah. Now Heidi was making some coin, but still,
his, not hers. His.
Yeah. Oh, his. Yeah. Well, it's not familial.
All right. So I
look.
Somebody
it's
ought to
like
be
Kavanaugh's
looking at that.
baseball cards.
It's like, yeah, right. But did anybody pay him back? I'm sure big time. Florida on hold.
Yeah. So now, what's your take?
On hold. We're on hold.
Because of the hurricane.
And let me tell you what. This is not being reported at even half of how bad it is from my friends up there.
In the Panhandle.
It is devastation. Sheer utter.
I love those towns. I feel so terrible.
I know, because the beauty of that all gone. But they today were able to get into some place. They haven't even gotten through to places they need to get to. And today they got in, and so they're finding more. The devastation. But it's my understanding that FEMA's not doing such a hot job. Water is not available. Food is not readily available.
We've seen that affect elections, yeah.
And I'm a little bit confused because the network that always covers this is CNN, who put all their people on the ground during Florence, which was nothing really. I mean, it was bad.
And now they're not around.
They're not there. And I don't.
And how's the Gov doing with all this?
Well, okay. So the Gov appeared with Mr. Trump. When he was here, the Gov is losing. He is behind by, I think it was 2.5 points. Maybe, which is, and that's holding steady. But he's on the trail wearing his Navy hat, and he had
Navy hat, right?
Well, he had a bad deal with the Navy and health care, and so he's getting creamed by the press about that. Stop wearing your Navy hat. And the Navy people here, military here, are not in love with this guy because of his, effect on the health care issue. And then Gillum got his chainsaw and is out cutting down trees.
Right. I mean, this is a good chance for a mayor to show some.
So, it's on hold. It really is. And they're sending out surrogates and all this kind of stuff. But, what are you going to do?
And Nelson, I'm sure Nelson's running around the panhandle.
He's leading the most interesting campaign I've ever seen because it's like the non-campaign. He's such a laid-back kind of character. But I think at the end of the day, the press has, as I said, has been just finally 8 years later really coming down on Scott, who had a free ride. And then something else happened, which is, he had said, I am going to my last day appoint 3 judges to the Supreme Court in Florida. And the Democrats took it to court and won.
No.
So that is now.
It is going to be fascinating.
Yeah, that's going to see how that all winds up. It's going to be fascinating.
And DeSantis, no sign of a comeback,
DeSantis,
right?
No sign of comeback. Oddly gone. Now
he's not playing well in Broward with the Allicockers.
No, I don't even think they're the ones who are so mad. He's not. You go down to where you've got the rural vote, which is all black here. And those folks are voting. Vote. So no, I mean, I think he's kind of toast, but we're not able to get any real poll numbers because they're not
right. And does it make a difference that the hurricane went through the conservative panhandle?
Well, two parts of the panhandle, because it's my understanding. Obviously there's the conservative part of it, but you get into those rural districts and
right. This is not Pensacola.
Well, but you have a lot of Trump voters in those rural districts who won't be able to vote.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, unless they can,
Well, I don't know how they can because you can't get in or out. And there was talk about that too, about what they were going to do about because early voting started down here. So,
and of course, and with Katrina, a lot of people left the state. They don't come back.
Most people
until they got a place to come back to.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I haven't been able to figure out what they're. It's up in the air. This is going to be very, very interesting. I think everything is up in the air, and like I said, as I began this talking to you, this is the week where it's kind of flaky. It's like
I agree.
In the hammock, we're not sure which way the wind's.
We're in a very flaky spot,
right? And so, any predictions for the coming week?
No, I would just think Trump doing he may do 5 rallies a week till the end. So I think, he's going to be something. He's going to be a high dudgeon. What?
I do have something.
What do you got?
Ready? I'm going to sing to you, darling. You ready?
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
Oh, where is Obama this week? Where has he gone? He's nowhere. He's like off the beaten track. We need Obama out there. Why is he not out there?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, there certainly seem like there are a lot of places he could drive up turnouts. So that's
odd.
That's a good question. Yeah, at least Michelle.
She's got this new book coming out.
She's got a book, right?
Right, but no, this to me is very, very odd. He's not holding up his end of the bargain. That's my opinion. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks, something different will happen. But as of now, He's missing in action, as far as I'm concerned.
I hear you.
Okay, so that's it. We leave it on that, darling. Till next time.
Okay, we leave it there.
Always nice to talk to you, Mr. Matt. Say good night.
Always
Hallie.
good. Kelly, good night, Kelly.
Kelly? Who's Kelly? Did you say?
No, I said Hallie. Hallie, okay. Sorry, I'm slurring my words here. It's cocktail hour. Good night, Hallie.
Good night, Matthew. I've been speaking with journalist Matthew Cooper. You can read his insightful reporting at Washingtonian.com and follow him on Twitter at MattIsCoop and on Facebook at Matthew Cooper. You were listening to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. My guest today is veteran White House correspondent and contributing editor to the Washingtonian magazine, Matthew Cooper, my co-host on Podcast America, and the author of a beautiful new book, The Heart of the Goddess, Hallie Iglehart Austen. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show posts new podcasts Wednesday, 3 p.m. Eastern at hallicasser-jayne.com and is available wherever you listen to your podcasts. Be sure to find me on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and on all your favorite apps. You can find the Halli Casser-Jayne Show on your Alexa device, too. Just say, The Halli Casser-Jayne Show. Oh, and come play with me on Twitter at The Hallie CJ Show. Here's what I know today. Women are at war with each other. Progressive women and conservative women don't see eye to eye on just about anything. Advocate pro-choice or abolish Roe v. Wade. The Me Too movement. Trump. Stay at home to raise your children or become the next CEO of a large corporation are some of the issues at the heart of the division. It's an either-or black and white division where the middle ground lays bare who women are at their core. The only thing most thoughtful women can agree upon is that the division runs deep and threatens all women's best interests. There are many roads to wander down if we want to fix this massive schism. We begin first with who are women. How have women been seen by others throughout history? How have women seen themselves in the past? And how do women see themselves now and in the future? How do our modern-day politics affect our current realities? In her book, The Heart of the Goddess, author Hallie Iglehart Austen takes us on a trip from the Ice Age to the present, from Nigeria to Hawaii, sharing with us images of the goddess, offering a soulful exploration of what it means to be women through the ages, offering us an empowering journey into the heart of women, leading us to the one thing all women have in common, which is our sacred, divine feminine. Let's talk with Hallie Iglehart Austen. So, welcome, Hallie. I think you're my first interview with someone named Hallie. Same name, different spelling. You have an E, I don't. Isn't it fascinating to meet somebody?
It's great. Yeah, I love it.
I love it,
too. Yeah, first time.
My first time, your first time. And we did discuss off air, guys, what our names mean. Who knows, right? Whatever. It's fascinating. Listen, but Hallie, you have written, I love saying the name Hallie, you've written just a gorgeous book. Every woman should have a copy of The Heart of the Goddess in their library. It's beautiful and it's thought-provoking. But before we get into the weeds of our conversation, first, what brought you to the study of the world's goddesses? Such an interesting subject.
Yes, it really is. And I was fortunate enough when I was 12 years old, I went to a school in Baltimore, actually, close to you, where I was offered the opportunity of starting to study ancient Greek when I was 12. And Edith Hamilton, who wrote the classic books on mythology, Greek and Roman myths, had been the headmistress of the school for 25 years. So we were steeped in girls, as Miss Hamilton used to say, blah, blah. So that was that. And I majored in classics for a while in college. But what really changed my life was when I was 22, right after I graduated from college, I drove from England to Nepal and back again with some friends. And that ripped my world wide open. And it raised my feminist consciousness sky high. And also I wound up waiting out the monsoon in India in the Himalayas and meeting Tibetans, refugees, and that raised my spiritual consciousness sky high. But I was torn between the two. In the early 70s, there was no place in the women's movement for spirituality, and all the spiritual paths, whether they were ashrams or churches, were hierarchical and male-dominated. So after a few years, I synthesized the two in what I called feminist spirituality, spiritual feminism, and taught my first class in 1974. And I was so excited to meet other women who were feeling, yes, the earth is sacred, spirituality being non-hierarchical, we can meet in circles, emotions are to be honored, all these things that were denied in the traditions that we knew. And so I kept teaching and writing about it. And as I would prepare for the classes, I would take what few images I could find of goddesses and to show the people in the group that there really had been goddesses that had been really honored, not just demoted, warring goddesses, as I now realize most of the Greek ones were, that there really had been goddesses who were powerful and who were honored in cultures all over the world. All of us, no matter what our racial or spiritual background, have ancestors who honored the female form. And I always felt better when I was preparing the class and looking at these images. And I thought, oh, these images are healing. I didn't quite understand why, but I just knew I always felt better. So eventually I wanted to do a book. And it was really important to me to include in the book goddesses from as many cultures as I could find. I did have the criteria that I needed to be able to get good reproductions, that they needed to be inspiring to the audience, because images speak to our hearts, they speak to our guts. And then stories, what stories do we tell ourselves? So that brings in the mythology part. So then I researched what myths I could find for these different Aboriginal goddesses or Native American goddesses or African ones, and offered these as alternatives to the images that we surround ourselves with and the stories we tell ourselves.
Which I love. Let's get into this. Define the sacred feminine, divine sacred energy, the inner goddess, Hallie. I think that's a term to some people, which we'll discuss in a minute, is a little woohoo. Talk to me.
Well, I totally understand that, because actually for the first few years when I was teaching, I didn't want to use the word goddess because I felt like it implied an externalized deity that we could just put all our projections onto, when really, to me, what we're trying to reclaim is our own wisdom, our bodies, and our relationships with one another and with the earth. However, I started finding that there were many people who related to the term goddess, and that was helpful to them. And being the way we are, the human beings that we are, to many people, the idea of having a picture of some inspirational, it's really about being inspired, or it's about what do we honor. So I used the word goddess eventually because I found that was something that people could relate to. And then I started using the word sacred feminine to try to get it away from just the goddess, just the female form. And now I'm even wanting to move away from the term feminine because people are like, well, this is masculine, that's feminine. I'm like, no, these are human qualities. And let's stop calling them masculine or feminine. Let's just call them human qualities, and let's name them by their names. And then we can have a more direct, less confusing conversation, I think. So I hope that helps. I'm not attached to the term goddess, but it works. I don't know of an alternative, and I'm totally open to others.
Absolutely. It's interesting because it's become political, and that's what is upsetting to me, because we've lost the spiritual aspects of it and what it can mean to all of us, male or female. And of course, then we get into the whole gender thing, and once you introduce that, then you really become political these days. People are having a hard time with gender roles and gender identification. I want to bring this up. I think there is a difference also. I lived on the West Coast for a long time. I'm on the East Coast now, but there is a difference in how we, those on the East Coast women and those on the West Coast women, and men too, by the way, adapt these terms, embrace these terms, or reject these terms. Call it inner goddess, call it the feminine, whatever. I think from my experience that people on the West Coast are way ahead of us on the East Coast in taking this new thing on to embrace the spiritual aspect of who we are as humans first, and then as we are with the inner goddess or feminism or any of those terms. You did say I reject where I am today. I'm rejecting some of these terms, feminine, but I think that has to do with even the word goddess, Hallie, because I think it's fearful to people. I think people are afraid of these terms. The more that they get these terms in their face, the more frightened they are. What are your thoughts?
Well, my first thought is, are they frightened by the word God?
Yeah, right.
And if they're not frightened by the word God, then what's wrong with goddess? I think that's part of, we all have this internalized patriarchal prejudices or fears or whatever inside of ourselves. So I think I just see a lot of different ways in which it seems acceptable. They're acceptable ways of rejecting, changing the patriarchy. And I don't even like to use the word patriarchy. I was just at a conference yesterday on creating a post-patriarchal world. And I like the terms that Rihanna Eisler used in her book, The Chalice and the Blade, where she talks about dominator cultures and partnership cultures. So what I see is we're wanting to move together, women and men and everybody of all genders, all races, all backgrounds. We all want to move together to a more, well, those of us probably are listening to your show. I shouldn't say we all want to.
I was going to say.
Although there are a lot of people who really would be much happier living in a partnership world, I believe, and they just don't know it. But anyway, we're wanting to move towards a more partnership world, a more egalitarian world, a world that is where there is much more equality on all levels. And I'm also talking about equality that the natural world, the rest of nature, has equality with us.
We're going to get into that too before this is all over. But I want to go back to, speaking to this inner goddess, the sacred feminine. I'm wondering what it really means in terms of women in the 21st century. Because I'm thinking to myself, do we hold the same respect, oddly enough, as we move forward, in understanding ourselves as women and asking for, equal rights for a world of partnership, as you call it? Do we have the same respect for our inner goddess? Some of us, I think, do. Some of us are learning to more. And then there's a whole group, not so much. I'm curious what your thoughts are on that.
Let's see. Well, I'm trying to understand what you mean about not so much respect. I mean, like not liking the term or not liking feeling vulnerable. Okay, let me rewind, backtrack, because there's a few things you've mentioned that I think are cultural splits that my work for 45 years has been trying to heal. One is the split between the spiritual and political, or spiritual and the activists.
Right.
And the other is just what the split between that we think of we're afraid of vulnerability because we as women in particular have been, and some men have been vulnerable for a long time. So we don't think of vulnerability as a strength. So what I'm about is trying to heal these splits, that vulnerability is a strength. So tell me if that answers your question.
Well, it doesn't. It doesn't. Well, it doesn't. It doesn't. I guess because I do want to take this to the political, because I think the reason your book can be so much even more important than it is, and I do think it's an important book. And I wasn't kidding when I said every woman should have a copy, because I think it's just something we're just not in the 21st century or even the 20th century connected to. We just haven't been connected to that. And I think that if we don't have our foundation, how do we go further? So I think, your book helps us to get that foundation that I think a lot of us need. But I do think it is political. I think that women, and I'm going to ask you this question, have allowed themselves to be used as pawns in a man's game. And what we've been fighting for, let me finish, what we've been fighting for in the 20th century, feminism, if you will, is to get at least equal, if not take it to where I think it should go, which is what you're talking about, and that is into partnership. But I do think if we go back, that there is a problem in the political world, because I think that men's hierarchy has tried to divide and conquer and made being female a wedge issue. Talk to me.
Right. And okay, so part of reclaiming the female, our true selves as women, is looking way back to these cultures all over the world where women were honored. I mean, if you can, like, one of the goddesses I have is the goddess of Losel in the book, and she's carved over the entrance to a Paleolithic cave, and you can see this carving for miles. What would it be like if, when we went into a temple or a church or into the supermarket, if there's an image of a goddess whose the image is, she's relating the moon to her menstrual cycle? What would that be like? And this was commonplace place for tens of thousands of years. So to know that reality is really important. Well, more than tens of thousands of years, because the oldest art that we have is a goddess image from Israel that is from 200, been dated, it's either somewhere between 233,000 years old and 800,000 years old. So this recent time is a real blip. It's the last 5,000 years is generally accepted how long the dominator, patriarchal, whatever you want to call it, paradigm has gotten control. So it's a blip, but it's obviously a very powerful blip, and it's doing quite well and destroying the planet. So we need to recognize what's been true, and this is archaeologically true, and if you look at language and mythology and so forth, mythology is just a shortened version of history. So what we can do today is start recognizing how, okay, we've all grown up in this dominator paradigm, which benefits the very few at the top. And we've all been brainwashed to think that there's a scarcity and we need to compete in order to get the little bit of whatever there is, whether it's relationships or money or power or whatever. And women have escaped this to some degree because we were raised as girls, but then we go into a dominator educational system. So we have been colonized to a degree I don't think that we're aware of. So we really need to decolonize ourselves. And that's part of what I think surrounding ourselves with stories and images that are still and were held sacred that relate to women. Both women and men need to be surrounding ourselves with these stories and images. It's part of the inner healing, but then it affects the external healing. And yes, no, we don't just want a bigger piece of the patriarchal pie for women. The patriarchal pie needs to change. And I do believe that as more women come into positions of power, the number of women entering medical school is higher than it's ever been, and it's changing rapidly. All the women running for office. I do believe that will change things on many levels, but we need to be doing our work all along to make sure we're being true humans and not just more versions of this very distorted human that we see in power now.
Well, women aren't monolith, and that's one of the things that at this point, and I think that's one of the things that's getting in the way of moving forward, if you will. Mm-hmm. And people by nature, I think, object to change. So there's going to be those who object to it more, and therefore are, we bring back that word again, fear, that comes into play in the midst of all of this. But I want to punctuate something. When we speak to the goddess, we're speaking to something spiritual, something divine, but not necessarily religious. And I think that is important because the thing right now, Hallie, that's being used against a lot of women is religion. Mm-hmm. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, and that, of course, people are leaving the religious institutions in droves and have been for many years now. And so religion is the institution, spirituality is the experience. So spirituality in and of itself, by the way I experience it, the way I define it or use it, it's a personal experience. It's like what happens if you go for a walk in the woods or you're with someone you love. Your spiritual experience. Now, if you went out and said, okay, now I'm going to get all these people to believe that what I experienced is what they should experience, then you start moving towards making it into a religion. And we can see, looking at what's going on in the Catholic Church right now, it's just very overt. Is that spiritual? That all these children being molested? Right. No, that's not the values that we hold. So we're really called upon to create our own spirituality, and human beings are innately have this dimension of themselves that where they've just been these studies recently where experiencing awe is a natural part of the human experience. I also want to say that spirituality is another word that I wouldn't use for years because I felt like it separated something from the rest of life, from economy or something, where I think spirituality to me is when everything is a whole.
Right. I get you. I'm with you on that. But it has the same effect, that East-West thing, which is symbolic. I mean, even if it's not 100% real for everybody on either coast, I think that there is something symbolic in these terms, like the fear of the word goddess or spirituality is to, wahoo for a lot of people. I think all of that plays into the hand. Listen, we talked about... Yeah, sure.
Can I just jump in?
Yeah.
Because you've mentioned this a couple times. This is, again, this split, as I've said, between spirituality and the rest of life. And And it's so interesting because back in the 70s, I was asked by a feminist journal, Quest, in D.C., to write an article coming out of a letter I wrote to an editor of the local feminist newspaper in D.C. about the unnatural split between spirituality and politics. And I think maybe where does this come from? It's a Marxist thing or something. It's religion is the opiate of the masses, but we are talking about, as we've been saying, spirituality. So I just want to say that I truly believe that this prejudice against spirituality is a tool to keep us separated from our well-being and our power.
I couldn't agree more. But like I said, all of this is, and let's get into some of the all of this, because it's more than what we've talked about thus far. First of all, women were worshipped and adored. I don't think that's necessarily true anymore. Certainly not by ourselves necessarily, but clearly men are having problems with women, I think. And I think it's coming to a head right now, to be honest. I think that Trump is punctuates that. It's a good thing. Sometimes you got to really tear things apart to get them to be restored to or brought to a new reality. But I think the old white men Republicans appear to fear women more than they adore them. Some of the women who say they are independent but by religion ascribe to being helpmates to their husbands, which is so much a part of this right-wing white men holding on to something. I'm getting into really, really provocative stuff here, but I think we need to talk about it. Many of these same women appear quite willing to give their husbands control of their bodies, their minds, their lifestyles. And, that's their choice, I suspect. But I think it gets back to making women and the very concept of who we are as goddesses, as feminine, as whatever, divide and conquer us. Divide and conquer the goddess.
Well, absolutely. I mean, you're totally right. And the goddesses were divided and begun to be conquered back in Greek classical times when we had this one great goddess who's obviously the earth, and then she became these, Aphrodite and Juno and all these different goddesses who were competing for various lovers. And so that's the story we've been telling ourselves for 2,500 years. So we're acting it out to one degree or another. And again, I think it's this internalized, I'll use the word patriarchy, the internalized patriarchy, when some people feel like, they like the benefits they get from being associated by men who seem to be succeeding by the dominated culture, in the dominator culture, or they have hopes that they're going to succeed. That's the mind-blowing thing to me, is that they think, well, if somebody like Trump obviously made it on his own, supposedly, that they can too, and there's just always this hope. I think, understandably, people are really willing to give away power, whether it's women or men, and that it takes work but it's very rewarding work. It's very refreshing work to listen to ourselves, to speak up for ourselves. I was just in this conference I was in yesterday. There was a woman who was speaking who said she came from a religious community. She was raised in a religious community and where, so much was forbidden. And she was saying, you have to have compassion for these people who they're so brainwashed. She said, I know I was brainwashed into believing that, the man has to be in control or whatever, and that you're better off the way you are. And so I said to her, well, what woke you up? And she said, well, I was really into dance, and dance was forbidden. And so that was her, what awoke for her. So it's just one person at a time. Every situation is different. And I just have to trust we all do our best to put out there what we think is healing, and that we'll see where we wind up. We may not. We won't see.
Right. Well, something that you said that was about succeeding. And succeeding is a very interesting term these days. I'm not sure it was always a powerful term before. We want to succeed. We want to go to work to become successful, for a multitude of different reasons. I think there is still a core of women who don't appreciate that. That's not their concept of success. That their concept of success is something different. And in the difference, it may be that success means, and I'm think my mother to the day she died was angry with me because I've been married and divorced 1,000 times and I'm not married. And, her world was, you marry a rich man and you go and that's what you were supposed to do, get your MRS. And I'm sure you were of an age of that as well. But that is still endemic in our culture in certain parts of this country, if not the world. And I think that's the divide. In that is the great divide. Are you successful if you do it this way or that way? One side says you can do it all, and the other side says, no, you can only do it our way. So women can be their own worst enemies, by the way, in that conversation. I'll give you that I only have a minute on that, but if you want to chime in, fine. If not, we can go on to a couple of other things I want to get to.
Well, I was just going to say, again, it's what we've internalized, or how in this woman's terms yesterday, how we've been brainwashed. And I think it's, again, you use the term divide. I like to see it more as there's people at all gradations along this line of being brainwashed or whatever you want to call it, or, or of empowered or whatever. And at any moment, people can cross over that divide. I try to see it as more of a continuum rather than a split, because if I see it as a split, then it's much harder to leap over a divide than it is just to take one step in a continuum, if you can follow my metaphor.
I certainly understand your metaphor, but I disagree with you, Hope, because I think it is a split. But I work in politics all day long, so I probably see it from a very different perspective than you see it.
It's heartbreaking.
It's beyond. It's cringeworthy. When you see something like Christina Ford come out and be so honest, and then have Mr. Trump just destroy her for a vote, basically, which he admitted to Leslie Stahl last night, but we won. It was okay for me to do that. And then to watch women behind him while he is doing what he's doing say this is okay. What he was virtually doing, and forgive the metaphor, but I have to use it, he gave her a verbal hysterectomy. That's what he did. He sterilized her. He sterilized all women because that's all that they're worth to that particular hierarchy that's in power right now. But there is hope, and that's why I like your book. Because if you go back and you read about these goddesses, if you look at these goddesses, if you look at this extraordinary artwork, oh my, all the things that go into, because to me art is everything. To me, that's where the gentleness of life holds forth, no matter what the depiction. I think that you can find answers to all of this if we're all open to. What we didn't discuss before we close, I want to, and that is how men relate to goddess energy.
Well, and actually, again, in this conference I was at yesterday, there was a presentation by a man, a Reverend, what is his name? Reverend Ladale Benson, I believe he's in North Carolina. And he said, we must challenge the lie that patriarchy works for men. We must challenge the lie that women and men are polar opposites. And I think that's something we really need to look at. I mean, one of the things, very simple things that I point out is, okay, in this culture, boys and men are told they shouldn't cry. They should repress their feelings. And you also look at how many more men have heart attacks, how many more men are depressed or suicidal. And it's so obvious. If you're told to shut down your heart, your feelings, then you're going to have problems with your heart. Right. And also it's biologically true that tears have toxins in them. So if any of us don't cry when we feel like crying, we're just keeping those toxins in our bodies. And not to mention, the emotional transformation release, but it's also like a transmutation that can happen when we let ourselves cry, when we, let ourselves feel tenderness. It's men being denied the possibility of being tender. There was another great, is really it's a travesty. It's a great loss for them, and as well as for anybody they're in a relationship, whether it's other men, women, children. It's really this whole thing for men, that men are benefiting, I do think, as the Reverend said, it's a lie. We look at the men in power, we're like, do they look like they're happy, that they're fulfilled? I mean, they're on top, they think they're on top of everything and they're triumphant, but they don't. My brother said that he was watching Kavanaugh and he turned the sound off, and he said it was just so amazing just turning the sound off and just looking at him and seeing how contorted and disturbed.
I think, as a matter of fact, you know who said that? And Murkowski voted. Was it Murkowski or no? It was Heitkamp. Wound up voting against him, not because of anything other than she turned off the sound.
Oh, really?
And watched him and said that was it for me. That was the reality of who this guy is, and don't we all get that? That's for sure. Where we are today in the continuum of all of it, how far down the pike do you think we are? I mean,
oh boy, that is a really great question. I mean, I say we're either at the end times or we're at the dawn. We're in the dawn of the new transformation. Now, I have to say, back in the 70s, I thought we were going to be done with the patriarchy in a couple of years. So obviously, I was wrong. So I've learned my lesson, and I'm taking a much longer view right now. We've had patriarchy or dominator culture, whatever you want to call it, around for 5,000 years. And it's ugly, it's painful, it's discouraging. But if I take that long view, it's going to take more time than we would like to disentangle it. And even when Trump was elected, how horrifying that was. And I thought, well, the good thing is it's really showing the pus. The pus is coming out of the wound. Yeah. And it's really visible. This guy is so blatant. And it's just showing what is underneath. So, of course, what I hope or think is happening is that we're seeing the death throes of the patriarchy. And like the film Avatar at the end, it was excruciating. The last half hour with that guy with the scars on his face and the bulldozer just keeps going and going and kept going and going and going. And I thought, okay, how am I going to sit with this? I thought, okay, well, this is what the patriarchy is like. They're not going to give up power easily. They're just going to keep trying and trying and trying. So that's how I see what's going on. And I hate that. I mean, I don't like to use that term, the pus coming out of the wound, but that really does seem to be what it is. And it's up to all of us, of course, how this scenario is going to turn out.
Couldn't agree more. Here's how I see that women have to be the ones to heal this bridge in the ideological gap. And until we as women bridge our own differences, we're going to never be able to walk in unison as one. And therefore, by default, we're divisive. We're the divide. We can't continue. We can't work as a unison to end this dominance over us, over our children. Oh, not just us, our children, our grandchildren. Mm-hmm. And the power, and that's it. And that's where maybe I'll have you come back and we can really kind of mull this one over, which is how do we bridge that divide between women? And if we can do that, will that be the answer? I certainly know that men must have some role in it. I'm not sure.
Absolutely.
They get it,
I just want,
Go ahead.
I want to, I do want to say, that there are men doing really incredible work on themselves and out in the world, and that is essential as well. And I think it's really important for women to reach out to other women and across the divide or the gap or the continuum or whatever we want to call it. And it seems more and more that it's not so much a male-female split as a dominator partnership paradigm
split.
I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let me leave you with this.
Yeah.
Republicans generally and Republicans in Congress specifically tend to be more white and more male than Democrats. But here's the good news. The net effect, not only are more women running than ever before, but it's mostly white men's seats who are at risk.
Right on. And I do want to say that's why in my book, In the Heart of the Goddess, I called from cultures all over the world as best I could find. And I just had a woman say to me yesterday, I want to thank you for your book. As a woman of color, your book is the only book that I could recommend to other women of color where they could see themselves reflected as powerful, sacred beings. And to me, that's so important that we honor all our cultures because we need all our wisdom.
We are all one.
Yes.
We are all one. Hallie, what a delight. Please come back. We'll talk again.
Thank you. I'd love to, Hallie.
Really enjoyed it. I've been speaking with Hallie Iglehart Austen. Her book is The Heart of the Goddess. For more information on Hallie and her book, visit heartgoddess.net. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show. The Halli Casser-Jayne Show is a production of Resec, LLC. Be sure to tune in to the Halli Casser-Jayne Show at hallicasser-jayne.com or listen on your favorite app. New podcasts are posted Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern.